Okay, so here's my opinion on an explanation between tradition.
Oh, Dan. Listen. First off, no hate. I love many of your videos. I've wanted to comment on some of your videos or stitch them before, but I have so many fingers in the oven all the time. But this one, I've been trying to figure out how to even launch and say this one on my channel. So, this is a perfect opportunity for it. First off, y'all go listen, see what Dan had to say here. It's wonderful. Sorcerer Dan's got a lot here. Very good, very solid. I like it. Generally like your content. You did mention a key thing, Chaos Magic's paradigms. I agree. And you brought the example of you could be Greek paradigm one day, and then Hellenic the next day, and then what was it? You said Green Lantern another day? So there's two things I want to get into on this. One's real quick, and then the other's a write-up that's been going around forever. I don't remember if I wrote it or if a friend of mine wrote it. I don't remember how I got it. The first thing is we do need to be careful within Chaos Magic and the use of paradigms. As Alan Moore wrote, in I don't remember which book, I would have to track it down and source it, there has become an issue within the Magic circles where it has began to be treated as a spiritual vending machine. If you are doing your paradigm shifting, make sure this is not put a quarter in, get a spirituality out. The other thing is, let's address paradigm. And I have this article here. It is called A Chaote Misunderstanding of Paradigms. I want y'all to try and rock with me. I'm going to try and get through this whole thing. It's only like two and a half pages. I just don't know if I can read all of it enough. But A Chaote Misunderstanding of Paradigms. For the purposes of this article, a paradigm is simply a model by which to understand reality. In occultism, we're going to get all sorts of pings now because I'm trying to do something. This tends to refer to the various systems or schools of thought that attempt to categorize and explain various aspects of occultism, and sometimes reality as a whole. The concept is found in many places outside of occultism in the same manner to describe different models which seek to explain reality. We all good so far? So a paradigm is fundamentally a collection of assumptions that may or may not be supported by any form of empirical evidence. A paradigm shift occurs when one or more of the previous collections of assumptions are replaced for one of two reasons. The first is that what is observed or measured no longer matches up with one or more of the previous assumptions, making that assumption illogical. The second is for developing a new hypothesis in a matter of, if I reject this assumption for this new assumption, how does it change the model? This is usually followed by testing to see if the new assumption has any merit. A commonly known example of the first type of this shift is the shift from a geocentric Earth-centered model of our solar system to a heliocentric sun-centered model. The shift occurred due to the motions of the celestial bodies being inconsistent with what was to be expected under the assumption of a geocentric model. An example of the second type, which is more along the chaos magic lines, can be found partially in the development of the theory of general relativity. The theory's basic assumptions are that the measurements of various quantities are relative to the velocities of the observers, that space and time should be considered related to one another, and that the speed of light was still constant between observers. Early developments of this theory, there was incredibly little findings that went against the previous assumption of space-time and velocities being independent, save for some minor theoretical results by Lawrence, Michelson, and others. It was only through a rejection of the previous assumption that the theory was able to be developed, and later tested through the results of Planck, Minkowski, and others. So what these paradigm shifts entail, and when we talk about shifting paradigms, is not simply believing something else. Instead, it is a temporary suspension of belief as to the truth of a previous assumption, so that we can examine the implication of such a change to test and create a more accurate model that would describe our universe and what we're interacting with. It To illustrate this, the return to concept general relativity, it's turned out to be a reliable model in everyday life. The implications are not very significant to those who have to deal with it. In measuring most macroscopic objects, the corrections do not make a noticeable change, so they work good enough. However, when getting up to the scale of masses and velocities, that relativistic corrections do make a significant difference. So the point of all this, because that was a lot of science talk, is that even by believing, which should be called pretending in the next context, that the relativity doesn't exist model is true, doesn't change the reality of the situation. Your GPS will still objectively be many miles off, and particle colliders will still produce impossibly inaccurate results when we discard this. Now, this is where the chaos concept of shifting paradigms tends to fall from very far from the mark. It's often assumed that somehow what is real changes based on what is believed, which is shown to be untrue in any other context of paradigm shifting. But my paradigm shifting magic still works is the obvious counterpoint. Assuming this is true, go back to a little bit ago where many relativistic results appear good enough despite the objective existence of a general relativity. Many occult paradigms are good enough to be able to produce results on their own, even without having to have a paradigm pretending to believe in it. Although it worked because I pretended to believe in it is often the explanation. Since this is not true for literally anything else in reality, this doesn't seem to be a very solid explanation. What seems far more likely is that the method that worked was simply good enough in the previous fashions in order to produce a result that could be seen in its methodology. So we're going to take a hypothetical example of a various number of more primitive tribes. They're only a half step more superstitious than the average occultist. I think some of y'all have heard this rant before. They all want to make sure the sun rises the next morning, so they do rituals to make sure this happens. One tribe meditates in a circle, trying to use the power of their thoughts to carry the momentum of the sun through the darkness until morning. Another one prays to God every night that he will bring back the sun the next morning. The last one screams at the sun to come back for hours. In the morning, the sun rises. Which method worked? In one sense, all of them, and in a practical sense, none of them. Rather, they all worked off a good enough mechanism, and in this case, one that had nothing to do with them, which also plays into various occult theories. However, many occult systems can be understood in the same manner. If they are all close enough to the mechanism, which we currently are empirically unaware of, that allow for occult phenomenon to be enacted, then it still produces good enough results, regardless of how much one believes in them. So the chaotic concept of paradigm shifting tends to be a little different. You can scream at the sun, you can call quarters, do your stuff with your squiggles, or simply meditate, and as long as you or the system obeys these yet to be understood mechanisms, you appear to get results regardless of your belief in them. However, similar to the formation of general relativity, there is a real benefit in the suspension of certain assumptions to try out the different theories. The benefit is not pretending things you don't believe in are true and leave it at that, though an article for another time, but pretending is completely different to a belief. If your beliefs can be changed at a whim, they are not beliefs, it is merely pretending. However, by temporarily suspending a belief in what you might assume to be true, particularly in regards to occult models, we're getting close on this, then those assumptions can be tested in some formal or informal way against another assumption, particularly where consciousness occurred. The difference is not, I pretend to believe in Ra, hey, you hypothetically real, but I don't truly give a shit about you entity, but rather, what changes does this make on my previous results if I incorporate these aspects into my practice? To clarify, what if this is true is completely different from, I pretend this is true. The bottom line is, belief is irrelevant. Reality doesn't change based on belief in any context. The only changes that occur are in your own assumptions, ideally tested against how these change those change assumptions. With a slight amount of skill, different assumptions may or may not change the result of a given practice when compared against the results. When confronting incredibly basic assumptions, this could lead to a great amount of progress as to which aspects are objectively true, but I don't want to give too many spoilers. Belief is a tool in measurement, not in absolute. we hit this just in time.